Hey, what's up, Serpentine here, taking a look at the recent release of the free-to-play zombie survival game, H1Z1 into early access. As many of you are probably already aware, this highly anticipated game was released into early access on the 15th, and while the game will be free-to-play on its official launch later on in this year, it currently costs $20 to access now in its early access alpha stage. The game has already run into the same problems as many large-scale multiplayer games in terms of server instability, with many players being unable to log on and play for around about 12 hours after its initial release, which had already been delayed by about 1 hour due to last-minute bug fixing. This problem has occurred with other titles on their official launches, such as Diablo 3, and more recently the sandbox MMO Arcade, so this isn't really an issue, and while it's still an annoyance for players, it's something we've come to expect, with companies planning for the long run rather than the short in terms of server capacities. What has become an issue between players currently playing H1Z1, however, is the supposed pay-to-win features of the game and apparent lying from the company in terms of these features. H1Z1, as stated before, is an early access game that labels itself as an alpha release. As is standard with these games in these testing phases, things change, and that is something to remember if you are ever purchasing a game in early access. We've seen this happen on grand scales with titles like Rust, where zombies, once a key feature of the game, were removed completely. This is something that the old community that surrounded alpha testing and beta testing games were accustomed to. Things would change, and they would change quite rapidly depending on the community's feedback. This mentality has somewhat changed with the introduction of the early access program to Steam. People are now paying to participate in these early testing phases once a spot that required previous testing experience so as to gather a more helpful community that would benefit the game from their feedback. Now, while some companies still employ this method, others have decided to sell this access, something I both frown upon but also understand why they do it. However, in doing so, you invite people that have little to no comprehension or decide to remain ignorant on what an alpha or beta stage actually means. Players have been crying pay to win from the forums of Reddit to the chats of Twitch and the comments of YouTube, and over what, you may ask? Well, there's two reasons. The first is a bug in the game. Who knew? An alpha stage would have a bug, right? It's like the game is still in development. Anyway, snarky comments aside, the bug was with the airdrop feature of the game. A player would call in an airdrop, and it was meant to land randomly in a radius of up to 250 meters from the player, as well as attracting large hordes of zombies. Unfortunately, the bug had the airdrop sometimes landing at the player's feet, and while it still attracted the zombies, well, the zombies were also bugged and stuck in their default T-pose. Again, something you wouldn't be surprised with while alpha testing a game. However, in saying that, something you wouldn't expect in a testing phase, especially an alpha, is to pay to test out these features, to potentially throw money at something that doesn't work. This is a problem that has been heightened by the introduction of the early access program and hasn't been made any better by developers taking advantage of the program and the consumers' want to try out the latest thing. I am against such practices, but again I can see why a developer would choose to take advantage of the market for early access games. After all, just look at the top sellers list on Steam. Out of the top 20 games are 6 pay-to-test early access titles. The second reason is a sudden change to the contents of these airdrop containers. It was perceived by players that these containers would contain crafting materials and not much more. Guns, ammo and food were all excluded. However, just before the release of the game into early access, the H1Z1 devs posted on their website that airdrop containers would now contain these previously excluded items. A game mechanic change that you expect to occur in an alpha stage game. However, some players have found this to be unacceptable, voicing their opinions not in a helpful manner, not going to forums and saying they don't like the mechanic, instead deciding to attack the game and its developers of being liars and supporters of a pay-to-win business model. Something, unfortunately, we will continue to see while the early access program remains and players participating in these games continue to expect a final product rather than a game still heavily in development. Do I think that these airdrops are pay to win? Well, no, of course not. Excluding the fact that these types of games don't even have a win state, this feature is more about purchasing an event. Players nearby are meant to congregate on the drop site and duke it out for the container's content. It's highly unlikely that you'll be able to receive one of these containers playing solo, especially once the zombie spawn bug is fixed. Even if you do manage to get your own airdrop container's contents, they'll eventually despawn or find their way to other players, as even with a bow, you can one-shot kill another player. People that decide to purchase and participate in early access games need to realize that the game will change, mechanics will be tested, added and even removed. Some of these changes you won't like, and you know the best way to let the developers know you're not happy? It's not attacking them over their decisions nor running around social media telling everyone the game is crap and pay to win over one decision that is likely to change another 20 times before its official release. It's going to the game's forum and saying, hey, I don't like this feature of the game and maybe you could do this instead. It comes off a lot better than some of the things I've seen posted at the moment. It's also a lot more helpful to the developers as they see a level-headed player offering their thoughts about the game, rather than an obnoxiously angry player caught up in the moment. There are two sides to this story. A developer selling a product and in-game items during extremely early testing phases where bugs are going to happen, and players expecting a fully functional and non-changing product while in early access. Anyway, that's all I've got to say on the issue. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next time.